understand wanting to walk away from the Order.
I know.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
What's bothering you?
Nothing.
Hello there. Throughout the entirety of the Star Wars universe, relationships are extremely important in one way, shape, or form, and relationships make up the entirety of the connection throughout the Star Wars universe throughout the main story. Using Anakin Skywalker as a main example, we have his relationships with Padme, Obi-Wan, Shmi Skywalker, Qui-Gon, Ahsoka, and the list goes on. So today, I want to talk about relationships in the Star Wars universe and how all these relationships collide together. So without further ado, here we go. Throughout the entirety of the Jedi Order, the idea of marriage and holy unions have been banned by the entirety of the Jedi Order, mainly due to the fact of, relationships and emotional attachments. See, the Jedi Order don't like emotional attachments. They don't like the idea of individuals being connected emotionally or physically, given the fact that emotional attachments will lead to the dark side of the Force, whether it's jealousy, whether it's, possession, or any of those figures that would lead somebody down the path of the dark side of the Force, which would cause them to become a Dark Jedi or possibly even a Sith. The main example, of course, being Anakin Skywalker. Before he and Padme Amidala developed this relationship that they had that started all the way in Naboo, Anakin Skywalker had to be tested by the Jedi Council itself. The Jedi Council deemed that he was too old, but also they were afraid of his emotional attachments to his mother, which caused him to feel fear. Fear leads to anger leads to hate leads to suffering, a bridge to the dark side of the Force, which would cause Anakin Skywalker to eventually embrace the dark side and eventually become a Sith Lord. The problem with this, however, is that Anakin Skywalker felt some fear because, his mother was still a slave on the planet of Tatooine. He felt afraid of the fact that he was away from his mother for the first time in his entire life. He felt afraid of the Jedi who were surrounding him and basically judging him for every aspect of his life. And he also felt afraid that he would never see Padme Amidala again, despite the fact that he had developed a relationship with her, or at least some sort of attachment with her, on the Nabooian starship just before they came to Coruscant. Now, also take note that this is all coming from a 10-year-old who has had life experiences, lived on the planet of Tatooine, was a slave for most of his life, sold to Jabba the Hutt, sold to Watto, and then eventually made his way to finding a Jedi Knight who landed on the planet of Tatooine and who offered him freedom, but in exchange, he had to leave his mother behind. So yeah, that's a lot of emotional disruption, I would say, and a lot of that has to do with Anakin's emotions towards just his mother in that general sense. Where we later go on to is Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, where Anakin Skywalker starts developing actual feelings and starts developing an emotional relationship and a emotional attachment to Padme Amidala. See, throughout the entirety of Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, it's made very clear that Anakin Skywalker has at least some emotional attachment to Padme Amidala. She resists at first, but then over the course of this entire time that Anakin Skywalker is protecting her while he is on Naboo, they start to develop some kind of relationship, they start developing some sort of emotional attachment of sense, and then whenever they finally discuss it, it's not a very good conversation that anybody wants to have with someone that they've had a crush on for the past 10 years of their life, because she ultimately declares that it's not a good idea for the two of them to have a relationship together, because he would be kicked out of the Jedi Order, she would be scrutinized for developing relationships and having, emotional attachments or even so physical attachments with a Jedi Knight, and that would be kind of a problem both for the Senate and for the Jedi Order. So the ultimate solution by a Jedi and a senator is to just get married, not tell anybody, keep it a secret from literally everybody, even though everybody practically knows already, and then have your wedding bands effectively be the two droids that you are personally giving to each other, R2 to Anakin and C-3PO to Padme. Now, another relationship that I want to be talking about here is obviously the relationship between Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Of course, Anakin and Obi-Wan are brothers throughout the entirety of the prequel era, especially starting with Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones all the way to Revenge of the Sith and during the Clone Wars, but unfortunately, Obi-Wan Kenobi was not really the father figure that Anakin was needing out of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi wasn't really ready to take on the fatherly role that Anakin Skywalker actually needed to develop as a good Jedi, but instead they were more like brothers, arguing, bickering. Anakin thought that Obi-Wan resented him because he was stuck with him, and that he was training him just because that he wanted to fulfill the final wish of Qui-Gon Jinn, and he sought another fatherly figure role in that of Palpatine, which did not end well for anyone. And throughout the entirety of the 10-year time between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, Palpatine was literally teaching Anakin everything that he knew about literally everything that he knew about. He taught him the ways of Coruscant, he taught him the ways of politics, he taught him the ways of negotiation, he taught him the ways of the Jedi Order and how the Jedi were crass and cruel, and they were effectively behind on the times, and taught him literally everything in between, effectively grooming Anakin Skywalker into what he wanted him to become, and effectively making him his pseudo-apprentice. And to be frank, it actually did genuinely work, as Anakin Skywalker saw Palpatine as his fatherly figure and as his mentor, and was more rebellious towards Obi-Wan Kenobi than he ever was towards Palpatine. So yeah, Palpatine effectively turned Anakin Skywalker into his very own apprentice, even before he actually became Darth Vader. Now, what easily has to be one of the most important relationships in Anakin Skywalker's entire life has to be between him and his Padawan, Ahsoka Tano. Ahsoka Tano was Anakin Skywalker's very first apprentice, and was actually one of the closest relationships that he ever had to another individual. Teaching her the ways of the Force, teaching her the ways of lightsaber combat, teaching her the ways of strategy, tactics, and everything in between. Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano were basically a dynamic duo that could not be separated no matter how much you tried. And after several years of fighting alongside each other during the Clone Wars, unfortunately there was an incident at the Jedi Temple where Ahsoka Tano was accused of bombing the Jedi Temple, and she effectively left the Jedi Order after they didn't trust her, and effectively turned her over to the Republic to stand trial, and exiled her as a Jedi. But of course, there is the most important relationship that Anakin Skywalker had, and that was with his own mother, Shmi Skywalker, who raised him from birth to the age of 9, allowed him to go with Qui-Gon Jinn so he could learn to become a Jedi, and then after he returned 10 years later, found her in a Tusken Raider hut, literally tied to a stick, and died in his very arms, which caused him to crash out, turn to the dark side of the Force, and murder every single Tusken in the entirety of the village. And overall, throughout the entire history of Anakin Skywalker, there are a lot of individuals that he had emotional attachments to. His mother, Padme, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Palpatine would practically write the story of how he would eventually turn to the dark side of the Force. Him losing his mother caused him to spiral and crash out. Palpatine grooming him from such a young age to turn him into the ultimate Sith Lord. His hatred for Obi-Wan Kenobi and him feeling like Obi-Wan was pulling him back this entire time. The loss of Padme, or the fear of loss of Padme, and Ahsoka Tano leaving the Jedi Temple, effectively leaving him all alone because she was the only one who understood his feelings towards Padme, and the only person who he could actually understand and actually have a connection with outside of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Rex. But yeah, that's all I really have for right now, and well, Happy New Year, welcome to 2025, and I'll see you guys later. So, may the Force be with you.